The Sanford family escapes the city for a relaxing vacation on Long Island, renting a house nestled beside a tranquil forest. Upon arrival, they discover the house is lovely, but the alcohol cabinet is mysteriously locked, leaving them with a sense of foreboding. Meanwhile, Amanda, the mother, ventures into town for groceries and spots Danny, the handyman, loading up his truck with enough supplies to survive the apocalypse. Later, the family enjoys the beach, but their peaceful afternoon takes a turn when Rose, the daughter, notices a massive oil tanker veering off course. At first, they assume it's just a minor navigational error, but the ship continues its relentless approach towards the shore. Chaos erupts as beachgoers flee in panic, but thankfully, the ship only grazes the sand, leaving everyone shaken but unharmed. Back at the house, the Sanfords find themselves cut off from the outside world. No Wi-Fi, no phone service, no TV. Just as they start to embrace their forced digital detox, a herd of deer invades their backyard, adding to the surreal atmosphere. As evening descends, Amanda hears a strange noise outside, followed by an unexpected knock at the door. Clay, the father, prepares to defend his family from potential intruders, but is stunned when the visitors greet them by name. The unexpected guests turn out to be George, the actual owner of the house, and his daughter, Ruth. George, the man Amanda had corresponded with via email, apologizes profusely for the surprise visit. He explains that a power blackout has struck the city, leaving them stranded. Since they live on the 14th floor and George has a bum knee, they hope to seek refuge in their own vacant vacation home. Amanda, however, is less than thrilled with this impromptu house party. In an attempt to appease Amanda, George offers a 50% refund and promises they'll stay out of sight in the basement guest room. To further prove his identity, he dramatically produces the keys to the forbidden alcohol cabinet, revealing a hidden stash of liquor and a gun. He even sweetens the deal with $1,000 in cash, but Amanda remains suspicious, convinced he might be a high-class burglar posing as the homeowner. Clay, ever the optimist, persuades Amanda to give George and Ruth a chance. George, eager to make amends, shares his collection of fine spirits and regales them with tales of the house's history, including the revelation that Danny was his contractor. He casually mentions his wife is out of town on business, but Amanda, ever the skeptic, demands to see his identification. Unfortunately, George left his wallet at the theater in the pre-blackout chaos. Just as tensions reach their peak, Ruth inadvertently triggers an emergency alert on the television, confirming the national crisis. With the situation escalating, Amanda reluctantly agrees to let George and Ruth stay. As they descend to the basement, it becomes clear that George knows more than he's letting on, thanks to a tip from a well-informed client. Amanda awakens to a phone full of cryptic emergency alerts. To mention the blackout, one blames hackers, and the last is just a string of emojis that seem vaguely threatening. She tries to show Clay, but the messages vanish faster than free donuts in a police station. Determined to find answers, Clay sets off for town to grab a newspaper. With the GPS on strike, he quickly becomes hopelessly lost. Stepping out of the car to search for a signal, or maybe a friendly woodland creature with a map, he misses the car radio springing to life for a fleeting news bulletin. Apparently, the cyber-attic has triggered an environmental disaster down south, sending animals fleeing in all directions. Clay continues his aimless journey, encountering a frantic woman waving her arms by the roadside. He pulls over, ready to be a good Samaritan, but the woman only speaks Spanish, leaving Clay feeling like he's wandered into a telenovela he can't understand. Overwhelmed by the language barrier and the general weirdness of the day, he decides to make a swift getaway. As Clay speeds off, he's pursued by a drone trailing what appears to be red smoke. Fearing the worst, he floors it, only to realize the drone is just dropping leaflets. Perhaps they're coupons for a pizza place that delivers by drone. Meanwhile, George, armed with his trusty pistol, decides to check on the neighbors. George is increasingly worried because his wife, who is supposed to fly home today, has gone completely off the grid. He arrives at the neighbor's house to find an unsettling scene. The yard is strewn with random objects, like a garage sale organized by a tornado. The door hangs open, revealing an interior that looks like a raccoon rave went horribly wrong. George tries the neighbor's satellite phone, but it's as dead as disco. It seems the blackout has taken down all forms of communication. Following a trail of debris towards the beach, he discovers a gleaming Rolex in the sand. Bending to pick it up, he's horrified to find it attached to a severed arm, leading him to the gruesome discovery of a crashed plane and its deceased pilot. Just as George processes this shocking sight, the roar of another plane sends him scrambling for cover. He barely makes it back to the house before the second plane crashes onto the beach. Back at the house, Rose is having her own meltdown. Unable to stream the Friends finale, she storms outside, only to be confronted by a herd of deer that seems to have multiplied exponentially. Desperate for an escape, she drags her brother Archie into the forest. They stumble upon an old shed, and Archie, in true older brother fashion, tries to scare Rose by claiming someone lives there and watches her sleep. Rose, startled, bumps her head and realizes Archie is just being his usual annoying self. As they head back, Archie gets a souvenir bug bite, Rose spots yet another deer, and they both notice the birds have inexplicably abandoned the area. George, back from his beachside horror show, confesses to Amanda that he'd sensed something was amiss, thanks to his uncanny ability to read the stock market like a fortune cookie. Their conversation is abruptly punctuated by distant explosions, followed by an ear-splitting screech that cracks the windows and sends the family dog into a barking frenzy. Amanda, fearing for her children's safety, sprints into the woods, only to be brought to her knees by the intensifying noise. Thankfully, the sonic assault subsides and everyone retreats back into the house, ears ringing and nerves frayed. Amanda recalls Danny's suspicious stockpiling of supplies, convinced he was in on the impending doom. Just then, Clay returns, brandishing a leaflet that turns out to be written in Persian. Archie, the resident expert on war video games, translates the ominous message, "Death to America." Panic-stricken, Amanda and Clay decide to flee to a relative's house in New Jersey, despite George's warnings about the dangers of the unknown. Their escape is accompanied by a chorus of sirens, culminating in a roadblock formed by a fleet of pristine white cars. Amanda cautiously investigates, finding the vehicles eerily empty. Suddenly, a swarm of self-driving cars materializes behind them, transforming the roadblock into a demolition derby. Amanda races back to her family, narrowly escaping the pileup as the automated vehicles engage in a chaotic ballet of destruction. The road ahead is a mangled mess of metal, stretching all the way to the city. Defeated, the Sanfords return to the house where George graciously grants them asylum. As rain begins to fall, Archie, confined to his room, attempts to entertain himself with photos he'd sneakily taken of Ruth, but a sudden wave of nausea sends him to bed. Outside, Ruth and Clay share a smoke break, Clay confessing his guilt over abandoning the Spanish-speaking woman by the road. Their moment of reflection is interrupted by a commotion in the pool. A flamboyance of flamingos has taken up residence. Inside, Amanda and George share a drink and some conspiracy theories. George reveals that his premonition stemmed from a conversation with a high-ranking Pentagon client who'd cryptically warned him about a shadowy cabal controlling the world. The client's sudden request to move his money and his subsequent disappearance convinced George that something big was about to go down. Tired of doom and gloom, George leads Amanda to his music room for an impromptu dance party. One thing leads to another, and they share a close embrace, prompting Amanda to remind him of their respective spouses and the awkwardness of the situation. George agrees to keep things platonic, but can't help but worry about his wife's fate. Just then, the ear-splitting screech returns, shattering the remaining lights and sending the flamingos fleeing in terror. Candles are lit, and the two families, huddled together for comfort, decide to share beds. The next morning brings a new crisis. Rose is missing, and it appears she's absconded with one of the bikes. Archie awakens with a jolt, his body racked with fever and a stomach doing backflips. To his horror, he discovers his teeth are playing a game of eviction from his gums. Convinced the bug bite is to blame, George volunteers to take Clay and the increasingly green Archie to Danny's for medical assistance, while Amanda and Ruth venture into the woods to search for Rose. After an exhaustive search proves fruitless, Amanda and Ruth pause for a breather at the creepy shed. Tensions flare as their mutual dislike boils over into a full-blown argument. However, amidst the sniping and snark, they find a strange common ground, bonding over their shared anxieties in this topsy-turvy world. A sudden rustle in the undergrowth interrupts their newfound camaraderie. Amanda spots bike tracks leading deeper into the woods, but before she can follow, a panicked cry draws her attention back to Ruth, who finds herself surrounded by a herd of inquisitive deer. Without hesitation, Amanda charges into the fray, unleashing a torrent of shouts and wild gesticulations. Ruth, inspired by this display of fearless absurdity, joins the chorus, and the deer, thoroughly bewildered, scatter back into the forest. Shaken but safe, the two women share a hug, their differences momentarily forgotten. Meanwhile, the men arrive at Danny's, only to be greeted by a shotgun-wielding handyman. Danny, ever the well-informed doomsayer, explains that a similar sonic event in Cuba years ago caused widespread radiation sickness, likely the culprit behind Archie's dental disaster. He also reveals that the Russians have pulled their people out of Washington, fueling his suspicions of an all-out war. Despite George's past friendship and Clay's desperate pleas and offers of cash, Danny, channeling his inner survivalist, prioritizes his own family's safety. He suggests they seek help from the neighbors, rumored to possess a well-stocked bunker. George, however, refuses to leave empty-handed. A tense standoff ensues, with both men brandishing firearms and exchanging heated words. Clay, in a moment of unexpected heroism, throws himself between the two combatants. Confessing his own perceived inadequacies, he delivers an impassioned speech about the universal desire to protect one's family, a sentiment that resonates with Danny. Touched by Clay's sincerity, Danny relents, handing over the medicine in exchange for a hefty sum. As Archie receives the much-needed medication, Danny shares his theory that the Koreans are behind the attack. Clay counters with the Persian leaflet, but Danny has more intel. His veteran buddy in San Diego reported similar leaflet drops, but those were in an East Asian language. Clearly, there's more to this than meets the eye. Danny posits that America's enemies have formed an unholy alliance to bring down the nation. George, recalling a rumor he'd heard, explains the three-stage maneuver designed to collapse a government from within. First, isolate the citizens by cutting off communication and transportation. Then, sow chaos and distrust, turning people against each other. Finally, sit back and watch as the country implodes in a self-inflicted civil war. Clay and George, realizing the gravity of the situation, agree to join forces and seek refuge in the neighbor's bunker. Back in the woods, Amanda and Ruth continue their search for Rose, only to be met with a horrifying sight: the Manhattan skyline ablaze, explosions and gunfire echoing across the water. Meanwhile, Rose, having taken matters into her own hands, has broken into the neighbor's house and is indulging in a feast of abandoned snacks. Hearing her mother's distant calls, she's about to leave when a light from the basement catches her attention. Descending the stairs, she discovers a fully equipped bunker, complete with a gym, a greenhouse, and an emergency alert system broadcasting dire warnings about attacks on major U.S. cities and rising radiation levels. But most importantly, she finds a treasure trove of DVDs, including the elusive final episode of Friends, Crisis Averted, at least for Rose.